My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. It's Saturday, so that means it's our weekend edition, a recap of all of the cases that we talked about throughout the week. We hope you enjoy it. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk. First on the docket, no Bill Cosby love for Elaine Maxwell. As you all may recall, Bill Cosby had his convictions overturned because a district attorney stated that he would not prosecute Bill Cosby if he basically cooperated with a civil deposition. The attorneys relied upon that. Bill Cosby relied upon that. And then he was ultimately charged because, well, based upon his statements in that deposition. The trial court, the lower appellate courts said Bill Cosby, that's too bad. But the Pennsylvania Supreme Court reversed and said, hey, when a district attorney binds their office, they are forever bound, even if it wasn't in a written agreement or some sort of notification. In that particular case with Bill Cosby, the then district attorney basically made some public announcements, and everybody knew that Bill Cosby wasn't going to be prosecuted because he was trying to make sure that the victims in that particular case received justice by basically being rewarded or compensated for their damages with financial remedy, money. That's what you get in a civil case. Well, Elaine Maxwell was basically making the same argument. She made that same argument when there was an indictment, and then she renewed those arguments once the second superseding indictment came out against her. Now, in that second superseding indictment, the federal prosecutors ratcheted up the severity of the charges, which is not uncommon. When a prosecutor will indict a case, they will sometimes say, hey, here's your best offer, so to speak. This is your best way to resolve this case. And if you don't do that, I'm going to supersede and bring more charges. Frankly, I think most prosecutors should just bring all the charges at once because that's the way it was intended to be done. And you're not supposed to be able to amend an indictment just by a filing of a motion. You have to actually go back in front of the grand jury and present evidence as to those new charges. So it makes sense to do it all in one particular time. However, Elaine Maxwell in this particular case did not get any Bill Cosby love. And the reason why is because the court said, hey, I got to follow this case law. I got to follow this precedent that says only the office for the United States attorney that makes this deal, and in this particular case, the deal was with that guy named Jeffrey Epstein, depending on how you pronounce it, where they said, we will not prosecute you or anyone around you in your circle of friends for any crimes in federal court. Jeffrey Epstein then pled guilty in state court to some misdemeanor charges. It was not a big deal, did a little time in jail, and that was it. Elaine Maxwell was making the argument that I was one of those people that was close to Jeffrey, and therefore you cannot prosecute me. And I understand the rationale from the court in this particular case that is handling the trial court for Elaine Maxwell. It's a case that she's relying upon called United States v. Annaby. And in that particular case, it says a plea agreement binds only the office of the United States Attorney for the district in which the plea is entered unless it affirmatively appears that the agreement contemplates a broader restriction. So you can see why the New York office is saying we're not bound by that. Otherwise, there is no case, because the deal that was made previously with old Jeffrey was down in Miami, the United States Attorney's office down in Miami. And this is the kind of thing where the trial court has to follow the law and the precedent. If it's going to be changed or interpreted a different way, it needs to be made at the appellate level. Now, I think one thing is distinguishable here from the Annaby case, and that is the fact that, old Jeffrey wasn't just some regular guy. The plea agreement in Jeffrey's case went all the way to the United States Attorney. It was reviewed at the highest levels of the Department of Justice. And you would think that somebody would have clarified that that plea non-prosecution deal would have been a little more specific. The fact that it was broad was meant to be that way by the defense. The prosecution shouldn't have done it. So I don't think old Ghislaine is going to get a whole lot of love at the trial court level, maybe at the appellate court level. But unfortunately, that's right, she's got to go to trial, lose, and then appeal her case. Now, in the federal system, sometimes you can do a conditional plea, which is where you plead guilty, but everybody agrees you're going to have an issue regarding this legal issue of, is there a binding agreement where she could not be prosecuted? Have it resolved at the appellate court level, but she'll plead guilty, and then she'll hang her hats on the appeal without a trial. There's been no real talk of that, but it is something that can be done, normally only in federal court. I've only done it twice in some 26 years, and it's only been in the federal courts. In the state court, you got to go to court, lose, and then appeal. Please go to crimetalksearch.com, sign up for a background subscription service. You'll be happy you did. If there's anyone out there you were ever curious about what was in their background, now is the time to do it. If you're going to get involved with somebody, now is the time to do it. When you go to crimetalksearch.com, you put in the name, literally millions of public records are searched, and a report is generated. And it's going to give you a report. If they have multiple social media accounts, you're going to find it. If they have multiple phone numbers, multiple email addresses, it's going to be found. And more importantly, you're going to get information regarding criminal history. Hopefully the person you're searching has none whatsoever. But if it's there, it's going to be found. You're going to get everything you'd want to know, whether you're going into business or whether you're going into a personal relationship. You're going to be able to find out the information you want to know. So go to crimetalksearch.com, sign up today. You'll be happy you did. Okay, straight to the docket. Well, the South Carolina police authorities have released more documents related to the Paul Murdoch case. Now, for those of you who don't recall, Paul Murdoch and his mother, Maggie Murdoch, were found gunned down at their hunting house in South Carolina back in early June. No arrests have been made, but as a result of other leads found at the house, other criminal investigations have been reopened, and there's been a lot of suspicion regarding the death of a maid that worked at the house who sued for basically the family did for a wrongful death case. This family has got issues, to say the least. Nobody's been charged, but things are becoming more and more clear as it relates to the case that brought Paul Murdoch to the national attention. As you may recall, he was the one that was charged with the death as a result of the boating accident that resulted in the death of Mallory Beach. She was one of the occupants of the boat that hit the bridge near Parris Island, South Carolina. Well, new evidence has been released. We talked a little bit about this last week, that Paul Murdoch had his brother's fake ID, and they went to a bar just prior to hitting the bridge, which resulted people to be thrown from the boat. We've been able to learn that Mallory Beach, who was 19 at the time, had a BAC of 0.155 at the time of her death. And that crash resulted in Murdoch being charged with 3 counts of felony boating under the influence. Now, those charges were recently dismissed easily because, well, he's passed away. There's no one left to prosecute. Civil cases continue, and there will be continuing civil litigation. The father has been charged because he lent his boat to his son. The brother has been charged because he lent his ID to Paul Murdoch, who went and used it to buy alcohol while he was underage. And various bars and grocery stores have been charged as well because they sold to a minor. And these are the type of cases where everybody gets sued, everybody gets charged when somebody dies. Some of the other news that came out of the information that was recently released was that many of the passengers refused to meet with investigators in the weeks after the crash. Connor Cook, who was suspected of possibly driving the boat at the time, he claimed he never was, in fact, the driver, but blood draws taken from him show that his BAC was 0.240 and 0.170 as the evening went on. So at 0.240, he is 3 times the legal limit. Oh, and of course, he's underage. There were observations that were made at the hospital. Murdoch's nurse later told SLED, which is the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, agents that he was grossly intoxicated and told her he had been drinking and doing drugs all night long. Connor Cook's nurse said he smelled of alcohol and admitted to drinking. The 3 other survivors of the crash were not tested for blood alcohol levels. An attending physician at the hospital told the SLED agent that the blood draw was not medically necessary for Miley Altman or Morgan Dowdy. Anthony Cook was still at the scene of the crash and not at the hospital when the others had their blood drawn. Now, Murdoch and Connor were the only ones that had IDs, fake IDs, showing that they were 21 or older. And after a day of drinking out at Murdoch's home, where they had an oyster roast on the island, the boaters stopped at a downtown Beaufort dock so that Murdoch and Connor Cook could continue to drink at Luther's Rare and Well Done. Where the bar gets in trouble is that a bouncer apparently checked Murdaugh's and Cook's IDs and allowed them into the bar. The Luther's bartender later told officers that Murdoch asked if she would let their underage friend in, which she refused. It's unclear exactly where Connor Cook obtained his fake ID. One of the agents were told that Murdoch got his from his older brother. Able to learn from the release of the new documents that Mallory Beach's phone, the police obtained a search warrant for that, but they were unable to obtain any information because the devices were damaged. Now, this case gets more and more interesting simply because of the power and influence that the Murdoch family has in South Carolina. But I think also the interesting thing is there's still no suspects whatsoever. Now, somebody that lives down there sent me an email, and I thought it was rather interesting. It said that if no one is ever charged, you must know that a Murdoch must have been involved. Now, obviously, we'll give everyone the presumption of innocence. You would think where someone of this power and this influence in this community and all the resources of South Carolina are coming down and bearing on trying to find a suspect in this particular case, and nobody has been able to find anything. A rapper who goes by the name of Silento. His real name is Ricky Lamar Hawk. Well, he has been indicted by a grand jury for malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Now, the young rapper Silento has been in jail since February when he was linked to the shooting of Frederick Roots. Mr. Root was Silento's cousin, and Mr. Root was found in the road outside of his home where he had some gunshot wounds to the face and the leg. Needless to say, probably going to be a good chance not going to make it through that. Well, Mr. Silento, like young rappers, apparently his big song back in 2015 made him a hit, made him think that he was invincible. I don't know. His manager claims that there are mental health issues, but the reality of it is it seems like there's a lot of rappers out there probably going to get in trouble for this. And the reason I say this is because I've represented some young aspiring rappers over the years, and they almost look at going to prison like street cred. But guess what? You can't really produce those albums when you're in prison. A lot of people want to have the image of being a gangster, and then when they get involved, they don't really realize that, they're going to spend the rest of their life in prison. Take a look at this picture of Silento. He looks like a young kid. What is he doing out shooting people up, allegedly? Makes no sense to me, but we'll give old Silento the presumption of innocence.
An update on the Murdoch case down there in South Carolina. When Mallory Beach was killed, Paul Murdoch was eventually the one charged with felony boating under the influence in connection with the crash. He was awaiting trial for his involvement before he was found murdered outside his family home in June alongside with his mother. New court documents revealed that Connor Cook, a passenger, told attorneys the Murdaughs and some of the law enforcement officers may have been trying to frame him as the driver of the boat involved in the deadly crash in Beaufort, South Carolina in 2019. Now, Mallory Beach, Connor Cook, and Paul Murdaugh were among the 6 on board the boat owned by Alex Murdaugh, Paul's father, when it crashed into a bridge back in 2019. Now, Cook told the attorneys that he lied to investigators about who was driving the boat when it crashed because he was told by Alex Murdaugh's father, "Don't tell them anyone about who was driving." Now, Cook testified that Alex stopped him in the hallway at the Beaufort Memorial Hospital after the crash and told him that everything was going to be all right. "I just need you to keep your mouth shut and don't tell them who was driving the boat." Cook testified that Alex stopped him at the hallway at the Beaufort Memorial Hospital after the crash and told him that everything was going to be all right. "I just needed to keep my mouth shut and tell them I didn't know who was driving and that he's got me." Now, during this deposition, which was originally recorded back in January of 2020, Cook told the attorneys that Paul Murdaugh had called his grandfather from the crash scene. "I heard his granddad ask him who was driving the boat, and he said that he was." Cook told the deposing attorneys that he was scared to tell the investigators the truth because he found out someone was trying to pin the crash on him. This concern sparks Cook's pre-suit petition filed in July that claims some officers of the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources and the Beaufort Sheriff's Office were possibly conspiring to frame Cook for the crash. Cook admitted to lying to investigators, and he refused to this day to provide a statement indicating that he knew Paul Murdaugh was driving. While questioned by the attorneys in regards to the suit, Cook admitted to lying to investigators, and he refuses to this day to provide a statement indicating that he knew Paul Murdaugh was driving. While being questioned by attorneys in regards to the death, Cook told investigators that he did what the elder Murdaugh told him to do because he was told not to, and basically who they are.
All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk.